It feels so good to see our girls back on screen, seeing them fight, seeing them interact, seeing them be lovable. I know we just started the hiatus, but it feels so good, y'all. I've missed them so much, especially with the uncertainty of Volume 10. This was nice. For those who don't know, the RWBY X Justice League Part 2 dropped this week, and without spoiling anything yet, it was better than I expected. I actually really enjoyed this movie. There were parts that I thought were done extremely well, and it kept me thoroughly entertained. The biggest flaw, at least in my book, were some of the pacing issues during the final act. I think the movie could have really benefited from an extra 30 minutes, just to really iron out some of these character-driven moments. But since we do have a smaller cast, we get a lot more heart-to-heart with these characters, all of them which involve a member of Team RWBY. Now, this movie is considered canon, taking place after Volume 9. I'll go through the entire movie, but if you simply want the bits and information that are more relevant to the story, especially Volume 10, I'll start with that. Alright, it's spoiler time. So, starting with Team RWBY, we're in VACUO, and it's a desert! We see our girls fighting off a king taijutsu while defending some civilians who I assume were just in transport. Weiss, Blake, and Yang are fighting off one half of the snake, while we see RWBY charging at them with the second half behind her. Understandably, Team RWBY is very worried about her, as she shoots up in the air but fails her landing strategy. Weiss gives her a good save, and we get such a good sequence here with RWBY's scythe. From RWBY lunging off of the truck to dodging the snakes, it's so crisp and fluid. She's using the recoil of her scythe so well, and is pivoting so seamlessly into her next course of action. Readying up the snake and then angling her scythe so that she can shoot down the throat of one of them while using the recoil from that same bullet to decapitate the other, it's actually just insane. Bravo for this scene. As RWBY flexes on this grim, Blake, and especially Yang, give such a look of worry, it's almost kind of comedic. Like, the most this fall will do would just drain her aura, but the facial animation done on Yang is just so expressive. It is nice that we get to see Yang show such a genuine sign of concern for her sister, and it doesn't stop here. Afterwards, Team RWBY settled down in this house, with RWBY being back to her bubbly, happy self. After a job well done, well, excuse me, princess. I think Yang has something to say. Obviously, Yang is not very happy with how reckless RWBY has been. Understandably, RWBY just gained her old self back and is as confident as ever. But this doesn't sit well with Yang. While we don't get their full conversation, it's a nice setup for things to come with RWBY and Yang, and I really enjoyed it. But you know what I enjoyed even more? Weiss getting some center focus. Thank you. Now put this in the actual volume. As the team discusses, they begin referencing Atlas, and this brings up some unwanted memories for Weiss, and she decides to leave the room for a bit. RWBY does take note of this, and this poor door gets swung open again. Miln has not yet recovered from Yang's bombastic injury, but this does bring up a bit of a worry from me. Not just this scene, but there are moments and topics brought up in this movie that I feel should have been addressed and resolved in the show. RWBY, Weiss, and Yang all bring up critical issues in what they've been dealing with over the course of the show. RWBY and Yang have a really good scene towards the end of the movie, but part of me wishes that it will be in the volume. I know Volume 10 is still uncertain, but if it does get greenlight, I hope they find a way to include it in the show. It's a bit wonky. If they didn't do it here, then there's a chance that we wouldn't have gotten it at all. But if they do it in the volume, I don't know if it's going to repeat these points, ignore the movie, or just what. It's bittersweet. At least we get some type of resolution. I just don't know how the main show is going to tackle it. Back to the movie. Weiss decides to take some time to clear her head, and she calls Klein for some comfort. And one cute thing that I couldn't help but notice was Maria's contact icon. It looks like she's trying to take a picture of herself but had it zoomed in all the way. It's so cute. As Weiss converses with Klein, she gets taught that the Shanice aren't being very accepted into VACUO. Who would have thought? But before the two can finish their conversation, Weiss gets interrupted by a code in which she recognizes from the first movie. She gathers up her team and they get in contact with the members of the Justice League. Afterwards, they head down to one of the abandoned SDC labs, where once more the animation since Volume 9 has been so expressive. I really enjoy how cute Blake is with trying to figure out the lock on the door. It's just so freaking cute, and then she gives RWBY a thumbs up. They just really know how to make Blake adorable. Yang gives Blake the most Yangiest wink, and if Yang winked at me like that, bro, I'm fainting. Weiss sets off the alarm trying to access the computer, where a bunch of robots literally just spawn. Me too, girl. Me too. RWBY continues to play on the offensive while Weiss works on the computer. And once again, the fight animation is just so nice here. I think the camera animations really sell the shots, even if they're not doing anything too crazy. Eventually, Jessica is able to open up a portal to where Team RWBY is, and they get transported into the world of the Justice League. Also, these robots literally have Stormtrooper aim. What are they actually shooting at? I would not be worried in the slightest. But that's a wrap on us being in Remnant, and the rest of the movie takes place within the DC world. Now, as for the rest of the movie, it was really enjoyable. One aspect that I really hope that they take away from this movie is the Grim. In the opening sequence of this movie, we're in the perspective of a child who's in hiding, but as the child is terrified and panicking, it only attracts the Grim closer. When someone eventually does help him, we get this really nice over-the-shoulder perspective. It really sells the fear that the Grim are bringing to these innocent bystanders. Not only this, but the adaptive Grim is so nice. Why can't we have this in the show proper? Essentially, these Grim were tailored to fight off the members of the Justice League, which make the Grim a massive threat since the individual members of Team RWBY can't solo them. Even the Loch Ness Grim had the ability to regenerate itself after getting its head blown off. I will say though, it is unfortunate that this Grim just dies off screen. The last time we see it, Cyborg was struggling to try and hack it. Yeah, don't ask. And in the next shot, it's just dead. We get a bit of fun action with the battles that we see, but as I said earlier, the highlight of this movie were the characters. First off, the costume changes just happen once they're transported. Blake's ears are brought up, but that's just kind of it. No explanation, we just kind of go with it. As for their new powers, we pretty much saw all of them in the trailers. RWBY gains the ability to teleport. Originally, I thought that this was a short blink, but nope, she can go a pretty good distance with it. Yang's ability is just what it seems. She can shoot fire from her gauntlets. Blake is actually just broken. She has wings, she can use her powers as a shield, even cloak others with her shadow bending, while Weiss gets absolutely nothing. She has no powers. She really is just a Batman caretaker for this movie. It was cool seeing her use her environment to kill off a little Deathstalker, but her gun is actually pointless. Literally, it wasn't charged. Batman really just let this stuff sit here. While Weiss was neglected in that department, they certainly give her more focus on her trauma and guilt of Atlas. And through this, she's able to better connect with Batman as she understands what Gotham is like. Trash. But she also realizes that he's who he is because of his upbringing, just like her. While Weiss didn't get much time to shine in Volume 9, it seems like they're trying to make up for that here. She converses with Batman, which isn't really much of a conversation. He's Batman, in which she's struggling to figure out her own identity. Now that Atlas is gone, she feels like a part of her is missing. However, once they're transported back to the digital Atlas later on, she realizes that her family has always been with her. It's sweet, but this isn't the end of Weiss's trauma. Like I said before, the final act is a bit fast, but more on that in a bit. Yang has a really good conversation with the Flash, since throughout this entire movie he's been dealing with the trauma of having Kilgore in his head, constantly haunting him and leaving a lasting effect on his brain. Does this sound familiar? Well, you guessed it, Yang decides to help out Flash, and he really steals the scene for me here. I really love his dialogue. You can tell by not only his words, but his actions that Kilgore has had such a major effect on his mind, and it's actively plaguing him. We even see it while he's fighting, going off on his own, and even getting upset at Superman for not letting him participate. For this exact reason. Weiss and Batman share another scene, but I kid y'all not. It ends with Batman having a literal heart attack and he looks like he's about to die, but then he just strolls up out of bed like nothing happened. Absolute Chad, I guess. Blake doesn't get a heart-to-heart scene, but RWBY and Superman decide to have a nice little talk.
Did you know I lost my mom when I was a kid?
Alright, Katara, I'm gonna need you to hold her right there. You're literally talking to the man that lost his entire race besides a few people. But hey, go off, sis. I know what you're trying to say. In all seriousness though, it is nice to see RWBY accepting the fact that she doesn't have to live up to the stories of her mom. Especially since she probably exaggerated them in her head as a kid. She was young and only had the stories of Supermom to hold on to. And now that she's trying to fill her mother's shoes, well, we all saw what that did to her mental state. These conversations all do their job and get their point across. They almost seem like teasers for what we could get in the actual volume. I really hope that in volume 10 more time can be allocated to them. However, there's still one more. RWBY and Yang. They are talking to each other, hallelujah. Yang has been worried for RWBY ever since her outburst in the EA, and it's only gotten worse. After all, RWBY has been overly confident in her abilities and she isn't playing as careful as she should. Yang's worst fear is that RWBY will end up leaving her alone, like Summer and like Raven. They hug it out and continue on their mission. It was so close to bringing a tear to my eye when Yang said that she needed her sister. It's just too freaking sweet. As for the final act of the movie, it goes by fast, at least to me. We meet up with the main two villains and surprise, surprise, Watts is alive. They try and make it a big mystery, but you can tell it's Watts by the way he talks to Kilgore. But we also get a name drop and a 2D picture of Dr. Miln from Grim Eclipse. Finally, periodically when they're referencing the show, they'll show us these 2D images from the show and they just look really good. I don't know, I just like the style that they're doing for those. But when they do realize it's Watts, it's very dramatic and intense, even though Blake got close to figuring it out early on, up until she got distracted. Apparently, Watts backed up his consciousness through Kilgore in the whole digital world, but sadly, Watts just feels kind of watered down here. He's gotten so arrogant that he's become such a generic supervillain at this point. He has this whole mech suit that he wears, but he doesn't do anything with it. He's not a fighter either. I also find it ironic how he says, "We can see," but then he gets absolutely decked by RWBY, who was right next to him. After that, Watts just kind of summons a bunch of Grimm with these little capsules that he has, and then just goes full summoner mode. Then they all go back to the digital world where RWBY gets their outfits back, everyone starts fighting. Weiss has a really cool shot, but it's Weiss, so she just gets diffed. And no amount of money will convince me that Yang can stop a punch from Wonder Woman. Not at all. Kilgore starts possessing everyone again. Evil Yang is high-key sexy, I cannot lie. Cyborg begins turning into a Grimm, but then no, he beats the code, but then yes, when he plugs back into the Grimm, Watts starts stroking his ego extremely hard, and then they all just kind of look at him. Bro is standing up against Superman, the Flash, a Lantern, Wonder Woman. Watts is not a threat here, and GG, easy, it's over. They trap Watts and Kilgore in the digital realm and then they just kind of go home. That all takes place within 20 minutes. It was just a lot of set pieces and moving parts in what felt like such a short amount of time. We jump from place to place and from hero to hero, and by the time we defeat Watts, it just kind of happens. This is a cute shot though. Batman looks so done. Blake and Yang said screw it and went off to their own cute little world. Weiss looks so happy with RWBY. You love to see it. And that's it. Team RWBY heads back off to VACUO. Okay, one small minor thing though. The final shot of any movie leaves a lasting impression. I really wish RWBY was the final shot and not the Justice League, especially since we don't know if Volume 10 will happen or not. The Justice League are getting like their 5th reboot, okay? Overall, I like the movie. I think it's a lot better than part 1. It's only an hour and 14 minutes, so it's on the shorter side. Does everything make sense? No. Is it fun? Yes. But with what we got, especially with us being in VACUO, I think it's a good watch. And if you're bored and just want some RWBY fuel, I think this can satisfy your craving for a bit.